honourable mention, of course, must go to the car in Wind... I just poked myself in the eye. Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, my name's Kit, and this is my world. Thank you very much for joining me. It's Tag Tuesday, and so in this episode I'll be doing the A tag by Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff. I'll leave a link in the description. So without further ado, let's get cracking. Question number 1. A is for America. What do you consider the great American novel? Oh, Jim. There isn't one. There isn't a great American novel. There isn't a great any nation novel, because surely it's subjective, and I don't like the idea of gatekeepers or arbiters deciding, because they're clever and sophisticated and educated and knowledgeable, deciding what's great and what isn't great for the rest of us great unwashed ignorant masses. It makes me feel little, it makes me feel small and insignificant. I would like to choose for myself what is a great novel, and that decision won't be based on the country of the novel's origin. It'll be based on how much I enjoyed the book. But I know that there is this thing, this great American novel idea, this concept. So when I saw this tag being ably performed by people much cleverer than myself, the immediate title that sprang into my head, which, by the way, was different from theirs, was Huckleberry Finn. And I was quite proud of myself for coming up with that, because I know with a certain amount of certainty that Huckleberry Finn is considered a great American novel. But by lucky coincidence, I happen to have read it, and it's very rare for me to have read the important books that bookie people like to talk about. But I have read Huckleberry Finn a long time ago when I was a child. Oh, I've got it. Look, here is my copy of Huckleberry Finn, and it's illustrated by Quentin Blake, who is one of my favourite illustrators, and I was particularly fond of his illustrations when I was little. Yeah, it's lovely. It's bucolic, it's rustic, it's rural, it's hazy and nostalgic, and it evokes bucolic childhood memories from my own experiences of childhood, but also sort of aspirational ones. I would have loved to have played by the Mississippi River when I was the age of Huck and indeed Tom Sawyer, and so it evokes those sorts of memories and wistful sort of nostalgic yearnings and hankerings back to my childhood and all of that stuff. I used to go camping, and I have photographs of my camping days when I was young that make me feel a little bit Huckleberry Finn-ish. And also they evoke nostalgic childhood memories of the TV series of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, which I used to watch as a very small child and absolutely loved, because I loved all the trees and the open space and the river and the adventuresome nature of the boys and the story. So Huckleberry Finn is a book that I read and loved as a child, and it also is very, very evocative for a plethora of reasons. Question number 2. A is for arc. Which character in literature has the most interesting character arc? Well, I know that you are all heartily sick of me mentioning this series of books, but it's the only answer I can give, and I will illustrate it. It's the Daggerspell books by Catherine Kerr, which I wax on about endlessly. I'm just going to hold up the first book in the series, but there are many. There are 15, 16, possibly 17 by now. She's a very prolific author, and these are still, in my opinion, the best fantasy ever written. Although the Empire trilogy is also up there. But the thing about these books is the central notion of these books is reincarnation, and all of the characters get incarnated and reincarnated multiple times throughout the books. And so each character arc doesn't just encompass the entire lifetime of that character, but all their previous lifetimes as well. And the books are told in a non-linear way. They bounce backwards and forwards in time, and you discover more and more things about each character. And for character, in the context of these books, you should really say soul, I suppose, because there are multiple characters, but it's the same soul being reincarnated into multiple characters. But those characters make mistakes, and then those mistakes come back to bite them on the arse several books or several lifetimes later, and they learn things, and then those lessons get applied in other characters that they're born into several lifetimes later again. So something might happen in book 2 that doesn't get paid off until book 8 or book 10 or something, but they bounce backwards and forwards, and the story is slowly revealed in its own time. So that's kind of the books. The character that I'm going to use as my answer for this prompt is Rhodri. Rhodry, I believe. Well, I've got it written down, so I'll check. Rhodri. He has the most extraordinary arc, even if you only use the character of Rhodri in the one lifetime, because he is born noble, and he becomes more noble through inheritance and various people dying and everything, and he sort of rises up the pecking order. He's an extremely important noble in the series of books, but through the machinations of his evil brother, he also falls low and becomes one of the lowest kind of people, a silver dagger, a mercenary, someone who is despised and considered with contempt by the majority of people. Even peasants and beggars spit at silver daggers and mercenaries. So he's right at the top of the social strata, but he's also right at the bottom of the social strata, and he experiences all of the things in between. But also he's a half-breed. He's half human and half elf, and he must keep his elven half secret, because that betrays the fact that actually he's a bastard and he's not nearly as noble as his family tree would have you believe. So he also experiences life as a half-breed, as a half-elf, and for lots of the books, he's living amongst the elves and having a completely different lifestyle again, so that's more character arc. But then he goes off on an extraordinary journey, which ultimately ends in him becoming a dragon. So even in the one lifetime, Rhodri experiences all of the aspects of human and elven experience, and becomes a dragon and does the whole dragon thing as well. And he also shags just about every character he encounters in the books, male and female. He has a lot of fun. So there's a lot of relationship stuff as well. There's a lot of love and true romance. There's a lot of pain and grief and suffering. And he works his way through lots of female characters and one male character, some of them human, some of them elven, some of them dwarven, and indeed a dragon. So Rhodri has a lot of experiences, and that's just in the one lifetime. But here, Rhodri has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Rhodri has 10 different incarnations over the course of these books. So although his lifetime as Rhodri has an immense arc, there is also the arc of all those other characters. They all have interesting lives, very, very different lives. One of them is a bard, one of them is a female warrior. And it's vast, it's epic, it's immense, it's a hugely ambitious undertaking for an author to have carried out. And it's very, very strange that these books don't have more recognition, because they're just an extraordinary piece of work. Anyway, so my answer to that question is most definitely Rhodri. At this point, Jim gives us a little interlude, and he says A is for Abby, who is Jim's beagle. This isn't a question, you're just supposed to talk about a pet or an animal or something. This is a difficult one for me, it's a little bit triggering. Depending on how well Editor Kit copes, either this will get included or it won't. But if it does get included, here are some images of Bilbo and Frodo. Question number 3. A is for Australia. What was the last book you read by an Australian author? Well, I'm going to double cheat on this one because the Australian author who sprang immediately to mind for me was P.L. Travers, the author of the Mary Poppins books. But of course, most people think of Pamela Travers as British. But she wasn't. She was Australian. She was born and raised in Australia. And then she came to England and pretended to be one of us, but she wasn't. She was lying and deceiving. So I count her as an Australian author who wrote some of my favourite children's stories, the Mary Poppins books. But this is also cheaty because I haven't actually read the physical books. I've only listened to the audiobooks. And there is a question coming up later in this tag that addresses that a little bit. So it's up to you whether you accept my answer, but I'm going to say P.L. Travers and the Mary Poppins stories, which I have listened to and thoroughly enjoyed. Question number 4. A is for Austen. What do you plan to read for #Jane Austen July? I don't do seasons, I'm afraid. I'm a mood reader. I pick up books and read them because they tickle my fancy. I'm in the mood for that thing. I don't care who wrote it. I don't care what its country of origin is. I don't care which politically correct boxes it ticks. I'm either interested in reading the bloody story or I'm not. And as it happens, I'm not a huge fan of Austen. That isn't to say that I don't like her work. I'm just not a huge fan. Please don't pelt me with stones. So I don't do seasons. I wasn't aware that there was a Jane Austen July. I won't be participating. July is also Pride Month, and I'm much more likely to show an interest in that than in Jane Austen, I'm afraid. Question number 5. A is for automobile. What is your favourite literary automobile? Rattletrap, and that's harder to say than you may think. I'm now on take 3 of this. Rattletrap is a car from the Swallows and Amazons books by Arthur Ransom. Rattletrap features in several of the books. One of them I will show you, Pigeon Post. Rattletrap features very prominently in Pigeon Post and has quite a lot of screen time, as it were, or page time. But I think the car is first introduced in Winter Holiday and has a couple of scenes in that, but gets a lot of use in Pigeon Post. And it's a car with character. As you can probably tell from the name, Rattletrap is rattly and clunky and unreliable. But I think perhaps Mrs. Blackett, the mother of Peggy and Nancy Blackett, who are main characters in the books, Mrs. Blackett is perhaps not the best driver. She tends to swerve about all over the place and crash into things. It's a bit hair-raising. It's much better when Uncle Jim Turner is in control. He seems to drive Rattletrap much better. But whichever way you cut it, Rattletrap is a bit of an old banger and has lots of character and is referred to with affection by all of the characters who travel in her. Question number 6. A is for anonymous. What is your favourite book or poem published anonymously? Well, for this one, I can't give you a title of a book, but I can give you a concept. And it's a bit airy-fairy and wishy-washy, and I apologise for that, because to the best of my knowledge, I've not actually read something specifically written by an anonymous author. But I did work on a play. I designed the lighting for a play called The Homefront Girls, which was based almost entirely on letters and poems written by soldiers in the trenches. And as I say, I designed the lighting for it. I operated the lighting every night. And so every night I got to listen to these beautiful and very moving poems written by anonymous soldiers to their loved ones. So when I think of books or poems published anonymously, I think of those. Question number 7. A is for autobiography. What was the last autobiography you read? Up Till Now by William Shatner. Please don't judge me. Question number 8. A is for audiobooks. Do you consider listening to an audiobook as reading? Yes and no. This is a perennially thorny issue. For audiobooks, I have to like the original author's voice in the form of the text, but I then also have to like the narrator's voice, and I have to agree with and approve of their style of narration and where they're putting their emphasis and stresses and everything else. It makes it very, very difficult. The only fair answer to this question is yes and no. It's very complicated, and to each his own. And on that note, I think I'll call it a day. Thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you haven't already, you know what to do. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share, comment, do all the good stuff, and I will see you next time. See you later.